Hello again. This week we're going to be exploring some paints. If you picked up one of these kits last Wednesday after school, then you'll have exactly what I have here. If you didn't, if you have watercolor paint at home or tempera paint at home, you can use that and pretty much do the same thing that we're going to be doing here. We are going to start off with a drawing, and we're going to do a monster this week, and then I will show you some different things you can do with the paint, and then we'll paint our monster. So let me share. All right, so the things that I'm going to use today, okay, that you might try to get for yourself. You will need some sort of paper. If you have the baggie from the school, use the paper that's in there, okay? You will need a paintbrush. Any paintbrush works, and you will need some paint. If you got the ones from the school and some of them have fallen out, don't worry, just put them right back in, okay? I made these so they're not they fall out, but they still work. So there's those. If you have washable markers, I want you to get those. A pencil to draw with first. You will need some sort of water. I just put mine in a mug here. Just check with your parent or guardian, whoever you're with, and see what you can use to put water in. They might want you to use, if you have cups that you could just wash, that's fine, it'll wash out. But if they want you to use something that you could just throw away instead, make sure you check with them, okay, before you put water into anything. And then I'm also going to be using my dry erase board just to help you get ideas about how to draw your monster first, okay? So that's actually where we're gonna start. So I'm gonna put this other stuff kind of out of the way a little bit. And I'm gonna start on the board. So we're going to draw monsters, and you can make your monster look however you want. I actually, I'll show you, let me see if I can find it quickly. Some examples from an artist. All right, I found it. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you this real fast, just to help you get some ideas before we start drawing. Let me share it with you. So we'll look at the artwork of the artist Chris Reiniak. Chris Reiniak is his name. All right. So he does what's called morning scribbles. And that's where every morning he would just draw a new little scribble, a new little drawing. He called them scribbles, but they're actually really good. And a lot of them were monsters. So here's this first little guy, super cute, giant mouth, tiny body, these cute little ears. This monster, we can tell, has some fur, right? We could see the teeth, the tongue, even little toes and a belly button. So try to think of all the details you can add in your monsters when you go to create yours. Here's another one. This one is also furry. This one, we don't see the head differing from the body quite as much. This one looks even furrier. This one has horns and a smaller mouth, right, compared to the last one, but great big eyes. There's this guy, which looks like he's laughing up a storm. Great big smile. This one's not very hairy. He looks like he would have a smooth, wrinkly skin. We could see the tail of this monster. No horns or ears on this one. So what he does is he creates these sculptures of his drawing. So he'll draw out an idea first, and then he'll turn it into a sculpture. We'll look at some of the sculptures just because it's fun to see them finished and in color. There's this guy. Isn't he kind of scary? Look at him. Horn, great big eye. He even has a chain around his neck. There's this one, which reminds me of a baby dragon. Super cute. Lots of little bumps, horns, ears, or maybe a little sea monster. I don't know. There's this guy who looks like he just ran through mud, and he's biting his lower lip, and he has these eyes that stick up almost like a bug or alien. And we're not doing pinch pots yet, but hopefully soon. Actually, I'm gonna send home clay. But when you think of monsters, you can think of Monsters Inc. If you've ever seen Monsters Inc. or Monsters University, there are so many monsters and they all look different. So your monster can look however you want. It could have one eye, it could have a bunch of eyes, it could be furry, it could have smooth skin, it could be tall, it could be short, it could have spikes, it could have arms, legs, no arms, no legs, it could have tentacles, horns, you name it, okay? So they can look in so many ways. So think about what the eyes are going to look like, the ears, horns, teeth, tentacles, arms, wings, legs, tongue, tail, nose. Is it going to have spikes? So there's so much that you can think about when you go to create your monster. So I'm going to go back to the board to help you draw up some ideas. Now, if you want to practice drawing monsters with me, you can. Otherwise, you can just watch me and see kind of which one you like and maybe use that one. Or you can watch me and figure out maybe you like this from the first one, but this from the second one, and put them together for your monster later on, okay? I'm gonna start with a great big mouth. So I'm gonna do a slightly curved line and then a great big U line underneath, okay? Now from here, you could change the tongue and teeth to make it look scary or happy or however you want. It could have sharp teeth that point down like these, or it could have round teeth or square teeth. So you decide how you want the teeth in your monster. And then if you want the tongue to show, the easiest way to do it is one lump and then go back a little bit and start with that lump and then over. So now you could decide if you want little eyes or big eyes, and I'm going to give this monster little eyes. One here and one here. I'll just stick with 2 eyes, but you could always add a bunch of eyes. Actually, maybe I'll give it a bunch of eyes. Give it 6 eyes. Then decide what shape you want the head and body to be. Some monsters are mostly head, some have tiny heads. I think this one, because I already did such a big mouth, I'm gonna make it mostly round. So I'm just gonna draw around. And then I think my arms and legs are gonna come out of the round body. So I'll have a leg come down here, a leg come down here, and then I'm gonna make them thicker. So I'm just gonna go next to the lines I already drew, and then give them feet. I want to give them arms too, and I'll have them, they're gonna curve down a tiny bit then up, kind of like a J. Do you guys see how that looks like a J? Put another one on the other side. And then its hand will be right here, and I'm just gonna do 1, 2, 3 fingers. 3 little bumpy fingers. And then I'm gonna do the same on the other side, but instead of a J, it'll be a backwards J. Backwards J. And I'm running out of room. I'm gonna do 1, 2, 3 fingers. All right, so there is one example of a monster. I could add little hair sticking out of his head, or give him horns, or ears. Completely up to you how you want your monster to look, okay? I didn't like the ears, but I'll leave the horns and those little hairs. Okay, so there's one type of monster. Once again, they can be completely different. So I'm just gonna turn my board. I'm gonna draw another one right here. And this one, I'm gonna start with the body first. I'm gonna make them nice and furry. So when I draw my line around the body, I'm gonna kind of do a zigzag line. And so I'm gonna just curve up and around and back down. zigzag line. You see how I did that? And then I'll do a zigzag line across the bottom. His feet are gonna stick out and he's gonna have great big feet with big toes. So I'm gonna have the foot stick out, great big toe, and then back in. Same thing on the other side. Have it stick out, great big toe, and then back in, and then behind the other toe, I'm gonna draw 2 more curves to look like the other toes there. And I don't think this monster is gonna have arms. This one, I think I'll just have one eye right in the middle up here. And I'm gonna give this one eyelashes. And finish off the inside of the eye. And just a cute little smile to the side. So there is another monster. So they can look so different, right? So you draw your monster how you want. So that was my practice. So I'm gonna switch over to paper. So if you came to get the paint last week, in your bag you have 3 pieces of paper. One is slightly smaller and a slightly different color, and it feels smoother than the rest. That is your practice paper. If you want to start on your practice paper, start on your practice paper, okay? If you think you can follow along without messing up, you could start on one of these. There's always 2, so if you mess up, you can move to the other one, or you could use other paper. These are watercolor paper, so they work a little bit better when we're using the water with paint. They're not gonna get as wrinkly or fall apart. If you use regular paper with water paint, if you add too much water, it'll start to rip, or it'll fall apart, or it'll get weird, or the paint will go through it. So these work a little bit better, but you do not have to use these. You can use other paper, just be careful, okay? Just don't add too much water. So I will go ahead, I'm gonna show you some tips on the practice paper of things that you can do with your paint, especially if you've never used paint before. I wanna give you some tips, or if you've never used these paints before. So I have my practice paper, I have a paintbrush, I have just my 3 colors here, my 3 primary colors, and water. So red, yellow, and blue are your primary colors. Using those colors, you can make any other color. We're gonna start with red. I'm gonna show you how we'll do the rainbow. So we could do our monster's rainbow. So I'm just going to, let me screw, actually, so you can see my water at the same time. So I'm just gonna put my paintbrush into my water, get it a little bit wet, and then I'm gonna go straight into my red paint and rub that water into the paint, okay? It's gonna start to make that paint stick to the paintbrush. You can't really tell because my paintbrush is red. And then you can move it onto your paper. So I could put a line of red, okay? Now, there's red on my paintbrush. Before I put it in any other color, I wanna rinse this off, or I'm gonna mess up my other colors. So you wanna rinse it very good. I kind of push it up and down. I'll show you in the little video. Push it up and down. You can kind of swirl it around. And try to get as much of your paint off as you can. If you really want to, you could have 2 cups of water. You could rinse in one first to get most of the color off, and then rinse in the other one so you know you're using clean water. So now I'm going to use yellow. Now, if I didn't rinse my brush and I put it into my yellow, my red's gonna get on my yellow. And do you notice how red is a lot darker than yellow? It's gonna ruin that yellow, and then we won't have yellow to paint with anymore. So make sure you rinsed it nice and good. And then once you did, mix that water with that paint, and then you could paint the yellow line. Now I'm leaving a little bit of gap because we're gonna put orange in there later, okay? Actually, we could put orange in there now. So I'm gonna add a little more yellow up higher. And if you start running out, just add more water. But try not to use too much water. Okay, so I'm only gonna use part of this yellow to make orange. So I'm gonna rinse my brush. And I'm gonna go back to red, get just a little bit of red. And I'm going to go right over where that yellow was, just a tiny bit of red. And I'm gonna rub back and forth where the yellow was wet, mix them together, and I'll get an orange. It's not the best orange, it's not the darkest orange, but it gives you orange even though you don't have orange. And actually it's really hard to see on the camera. So now I'm gonna rinse, I'm gonna do blue. I'm gonna leave a space between the yellow and the blue though, because we'll put green between those. So rinse, get blue, paint a line of blue. Now if it's really light, then that means you want more paint, less water, okay? If it's really dark and you want it lighter, that means you want more water, less paint. So there's my blue. I'm gonna rinse my brush really good. To make blue, you're going to use yellow and blue. So I rinse my brush, I'm gonna get more yellow. And I'm gonna put that between the yellow and the blue. And I'm gonna rinse real good. Go back to blue. And now I'm gonna add some blue to that yellow. Once again, try not to add too much. And go back and forth while that yellow is still wet. Mix it together on your paper. And you'll get green. See how we did that? Look, now that orange is starting to look more orange. The very last color of our rainbow is violet or purple. Same thing, just a different word for it. You could call it violet or purple. And we're gonna use blue and red to make that. So I'll take blue and paint a little more blue underneath my other blue. Rinse my brush, get some red now. And then mix that red where that blue is still wet, back and forth, mix it up on the paper. And I need a little more blue, so I'm gonna rinse my brush. A little more blue. Add another layer of blue. All right, there we go. That looks a little more purple. And that's how you can make all the colors, even though I only gave you 3, okay? Now some other tips. If you have washable markers, so if they say washable marker, okay, then you can use them like paint too. So I only have blue, orange, and black, but I'll show you. So if I put blue, orange, and black on my paper, you would just put these where you already want that color, but then you could use your brush with some water on it. Let me rinse the paint off. And go back over it. And if you rub where that marker is, you'll start to see some of that paint is gonna come off. Now, do you see those little chunks? That's where this practice paper is starting to fall apart. So that's what happens when we don't use the watercolor paper, is that's what'll happen. So you'll start to get little chunks of your paper. But if you watch, then we could start to smear out those colors. You can't see it very good, but it adds a cool effect. You want to try to do it while the marker's still, like you just put down the marker. If you wait till the marker is completely dry, like if you put it down yesterday and you try to do this, it probably won't work as good. But you can start to spread out that color too. So if you don't have paint, you can also do that to help show your artwork. So those are some tips for painting. I already showed you how to draw a monster, so we're just gonna get right to it. So I'm gonna switch to one of my pieces of watercolor paper. Remember, they're a little bit, they have a little bit more of a texture. If you fill them, they're slightly bumpy, and you can actually, I don't know if you can see the bumps on this camera, but the paper is a tiny bit bumpy. Now I'm gonna start with pencil, so if I mess up, I can erase before I start painting. I showed you that you can use markers. So if I wanted to, I could trace all these tentacles or legs or arms or whatever they are, and those lines I added. And then, let me make sure my brush is clean. I could use that to kind of paint in my monster. You see how I'm doing that? So if you want to use markers, because you don't have paint, you could also do this, okay? And you could do it on regular paper, just remember not to get it too wet. So I'm gonna rinse my brush and I'm gonna get yellow and I'm gonna do that at the very top of the horns. Very top of the horns. Just this tiny little area. And then I'm also gonna add the area underneath. And I'm gonna turn that green. So I'm gonna rinse my brush, get some blue. And I'm gonna mix that with that wet yellow. You see how it's kind of spreading all on its own? So if it's wet, it'll do that. It'll just kind of spread all on its own. And then I'm just gonna get just blue. Paint that next little area. And the area after to make purple. Rinse my brush, get some red, mix it in with part of my blue here to make purple. And then I'm going to use just red for that last little piece on both sides. And if you'll notice that purple is kind of starting to come down into the red. So you have to be careful with watercolor paints because they will just kind of mix together even if you don't mean to. So be careful painting colors next to each other if they're still wet, because then they'll kind of paint onto each other. I'm going to be careful not to touch my paint, but I'm going to go ahead and color in the mouth. Actually, I think what I'll do is mostly color it in and then use my wet brush to help me fill in the rest so I don't have to spend as long coloring. So I'm just going to kind of scribble it in partially. Then I'll get my wet brush, make sure I rinse my blue off of it, and use that to fill in the rest. It'll create a blackish paint if I do that. Cover up that white I missed. And while I have this black paint that I now made on my brush, I'm going to go ahead and paint in the eyes with black. I can kind of rub, this is kind of wet down here, rub some extra of the paint off and kind of add to the eyes to make them a little bit darker. All right, you guys, there is my monster. While they're still drying, try not to pick them up because sometimes the paint will drip. You can paint around your monster too if you wanted. You could always use your markers to create like designs around the monster to paint that, or you could just use the colors you have. You could make the background rainbow. So I might just paint it yellow actually, because I didn't use very much yellow. Now my picture is super complete. My background is painted all the way around my monster. Make sure you can see the whole thing. And that's my monster painting. When you are done with these paints, just leave them sitting so they're facing up where they're not gonna get knocked over, and just let them dry out again, okay? And then you can put them back in the baggie and then rinse your brush really good. If your water is dirty, then rinse it in clean water in the sink, and then try to get all the extra water off, okay? And try to reshape the bristles. So if you put them like upside down in a cup to dry, you're gonna make them bend. So try to make sure they're in the right direction, and then just leave your brush somewhere to dry for next time and dump out your dirty water, okay? And then you can wash that cup if you need to wash that cup. And then it'll be ready to use next time. All right, guys, bye. I thought I'd show you. There he is. Very cool. Okay, now bye.